It began with a familiar scene in Dutch politics: late-night negotiations behind closed doors in The Hague, tense voices in the corridors of power, and then the momentous announcement. The coalition government, led by Prime Minister, insert PM's name, had officially collapsed. The tipping point was a heated dispute over immigration policy, specifically a controversial plan to tighten rules on family reunification for asylum seekers. This proposal, intended to stem the rising tide of migration into the Netherlands, was pushed by more conservative factions of the government, citing pressure on public services, housing, and social cohesion. But progressive coalition partners staunchly opposed the measure, arguing it betrayed humanitarian principles and risked deepening societal divides. As internal tensions spilled into public view, compromise became impossible. The Prime Minister, facing an impasse, tendered his government's resignation to the monarch, marking yet another chapter in the Netherlands' long history of fragile coalitions and political volatility. The political fallout was immediate and far-reaching. With the government dissolved, the country is now heading towards snap elections in the coming months, its fifth major election in just over a decade. For the time being, a caretaker government will assume limited duties, unable to pass significant legislation or make binding commitments. This interim period leaves many urgent domestic issues in limbo. Critical climate reforms, solutions to a worsening housing crisis, and initiatives to tackle inflation are all now stalled. On the streets, public frustration is palpable. Citizens, already weary of inflation, energy costs, and immigration debates, now face months of political campaigning and uncertainty. The collapse has also amplified the voices of populist and far-right parties, particularly the Party for Freedom led by Geert Wilders, which has seized upon the immigration dispute to fuel its narrative of Dutch identity under threat. Early polling suggests these groups may gain more ground in the upcoming elections, potentially reshaping the political landscape even further to the right. But this crisis is not confined within Dutch borders. The collapse comes at a critical time for Europe and the broader Western alliance. Just weeks from now, leaders of NATO's 32 member states are set to meet in Washington, D.C., for a summit described by many analysts as one of the most pivotal since the alliance's founding. With Russia's war in Ukraine entering a dangerous new phase, the NATO summit is expected to address urgent matters: boosting collective defense budgets, reinforcing military aid to Kyiv, enhancing troop deployments along Europe's eastern flank, and shaping long-term strategies to contain Russian aggression. The Netherlands, traditionally a strong NATO partner and a key voice in European diplomacy, will now attend the summit under a caretaker administration, politically weakened, internally distracted, and unable to make firm, forward-looking commitments. This has raised serious concerns among allies about the unity and decisiveness of NATO at a time when it can least afford indecision. The situation is further complicated by rising geopolitical tensions elsewhere. With uncertainty growing in U.S. domestic politics ahead of its own elections, questions surrounding transatlantic cooperation and leadership are intensifying. Meanwhile, EU institutions in Brussels are growing uneasy about the ripple effects of yet another member state in crisis. European Council officials worry that Dutch inaction or diluted influence at the summit could set back efforts to coordinate military procurement and strategic autonomy among EU members. In Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged the Dutch crisis with guarded optimism, expressing hope that support for Ukraine's defense would transcend political changes in the Netherlands. Still, the symbolism is unavoidable. As NATO looks to demonstrate strength and resolve, one of its founding members appears distracted and divided. Behind the scenes, Dutch diplomats are working overtime to reassure allies that the Netherlands remains committed to NATO objectives. Officials insist that the country's existing defense pledges and aid packages to Ukraine will be honored. But there's little doubt that the loss of a stable, fully empowered government weakens the Netherlands' leverage in high-stakes discussions on burden sharing, new defense deployments, and future enlargement plans. Analysts say this situation highlights a deeper challenge: the growing fragility of Western democracies at a time when authoritarian powers are watching closely. As domestic polarization fractures consensus in capitals from Washington to Warsaw, the ability of democratic states to act decisively on the world stage is increasingly at risk. Back home, Dutch voters are bracing for what many expect to be a bitter and ideologically charged campaign season. Immigration, once again, will be a central issue, but so too will climate policy, energy independence, housing, and the role of the Netherlands in global affairs. The political center is under pressure, and the next governing coalition, whenever it forms, may be even more fragmented than the last. In the meantime, key decisions that affect millions at home and abroad will be deferred, debated, or diluted. For a nation known for its pragmatism and consensus-driven politics, this moment marks a profound departure, a collision of internal division and external urgency. As Europe prepares for another summer of geopolitical flux, the Netherlands finds itself at a crossroads, a country caught between domestic discord and international responsibility. The stakes are high, not just for Dutch citizens, but for the future of European unity, the credibility of NATO, and the West's ability to respond to a rapidly changing world. And as leaders gather under the banner of transatlantic security in Washington, the question remains: without a clear Dutch voice at the table, who will fill the void?